Hey everybody, this is Kathy Klotz-Guest here, and we are doing sort of a podcast, video cast. We're doing a video audio podcast all at the same time. This is the Improv and Innovation Cafe, and we are going to discuss something very fun with an author I'm really excited to talk to you about. So, Writing Without Bullshit is his latest book. Josh Bernoff has co-authored also 3 other books. This has not been co-authored, it's all his. And he's co-authored 3 other books, including Groundswell with Charlene Lee. And he was a Forrester analyst and has been tracking technology and studying technology for many, many years. Welcome, Josh Bernoff.
Hi, Kathy. It's really great to be on air with you.
Thanks for coming. And I have to give a little backstory. Josh has been very patient while we've had all kinds of things going on with getting him on the show. So I feel like, but I don't know, he's been playing the exclusive card, I think, just so that we're more appreciative of having him on the show.
I was not trying to evade you. Just the typical missed emails, technology problems. It's just the same stuff everybody else has to deal with. So.
Exactly. No, I kid you. I mean, and some of these were kind of our own scheduling and mine as well. Mm-hmm. But we're very excited to have Josh here. And I have to just say, Josh, your sweater is amazing.
Had to dress for the occasion here. I'd like to wish everyone a happy Hanukkah and a Merry Christmas and whatever else you may be celebrating.
Absolutely. Festivus for the rest of us, whatever it is exactly. Well, let's jump on in because there's a lot of really great stuff. Again, I'm gonna sort of do the book here, Writing Without Bullshit. All right. Woohoo. And I got my book in the background. Stop boring me. But talk to me a little bit. Why now? I mean, bullshit has been around for so long, sadly, in marketing and politics and writing and speaking, and it's a big problem. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm thinking how perfect having you on now because in the last couple of weeks, the big thing in social media is fake news and why there's so much fake news, and that's a whole other problem. So I'm just wondering, sort of, what prompted you to write this book? Like, why now?
Well, I can give you 2 answers to that. The first one has to do with the state that everybody is in right now. When I talk about bullshit, I'm talking about something very specific, not exactly the same as what everybody else means. Yeah. For me, bullshit just consists of any form of communication that doesn't clearly and accurately get across what it's trying to. And that inaccurate, bloated communication, the emails that don't get to the point, the press releases that are full of bloviation and jargon, that's a problem. And it's more of a problem now because people read everything on a screen. Yeah. And when you read on a screen, it's much more difficult to concentrate and figure out what's going on. The second reason that I did it is because when I left Forrester Research, where I had been an analyst for 20 years, I said, all right, I'm not going to be analyzing technology and doing business strategy anymore. What do I know about? And I realized that I had received 10,000 press releases. That's not an exaggeration as an analyst, that I had probably received millions of emails, and that the biggest, most consistent problem that nobody was willing to talk about was this problem of how much bullshit we all have to deal with. So I said, all right, this is a new thing for me to be able to talk about based on all that experience that I've built up.
Yeah, no, certainly. And if anybody's been on the receiving end of as many press releases as you have, you've seen your share of stuff, let me tell you. Yeah. No question. One of my favorite parts, and I just have to say this because I loved it so much, is well, the book is great, but the disclaimer, which I loved, because it made me laugh out loud. It made me laugh. So Josh writes, and so well, he says, well, I hope these words will help you. You alone are responsible for the consequences, positive or negative, of writing without bullshit. So that's as close to a bullshit release liability for.
Well, it's funny. I mean, this is the first time I've written a book that I wasn't part of a corporation. So I said, well, what happens if somebody takes my advice, which is about how to be very direct and clear, and says to their boss, you know what, I think you're doing a terrible job, and then they get fired. And then they sue me and say, you told me to do this. So I think everyone knows that if you read a business book, you're responsible for your own behavior, even if it suggests that you do something. But I wanted to get it on the record that, yes, I think these are the right things to do. But if you don't use your own judgment, that's your problem, not mine.
Well, I loved it because it was so beautiful, and it just made me giggle because I knew exactly. I totally get it. I totally get it. Results may vary. Is like
Results may vary. Yes.
Yes. Mileage will vary. Talk to us a little bit about. And I know you're really sort of anchoring it deep in sort of the writing that you see in business, but it could be other things too. What's the most egregious example of bullshit that you've seen when you were writing this book that made you go, oh my God, wow?
That's a really difficult thing to choose. So let me talk about a few. One of the things I definitely take apart in there are the statements that companies make about who they are on their website. Yeah. You go to their website and they describe who they are, and they're full of jargon and passive voice and lots of meaningless qualifiers. We're the greatest this, lots and lots of this. We have deep expertise, and you take that stuff apart and you realize, they're saying, hey, we know how to deal with healthcare data or whatever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. There's a company called Inovalon whose message statement I just tore apart. And that's one of the things I do in this book is I name names. Lots of people are like, let me show you this email I got. I'm going to anonymize it. I say, let me show you this stupid thing that this company did. The other one, which I have to cite, just because it's such an incredible example, is Stephen Elop was the CEO of Nokia, and he ended up, when Microsoft acquired Nokia, he ended up in charge of the division of Microsoft that was doing the mobile phones. Mm-hmm. So he had tens of thousands of people reporting to him, and he wrote an email that was 1,100 words long and rambles on about various things. And then if you're paying close attention, this email was sent to all of his people in his entire department. You go 3/4 of the way through, he says, oh, and by the way, 12,500 of you are going to lose your jobs. Right? So it's like, all right, talk about burying the lead. How can you write a 1,100 word email and not mention the most important thing until 3/4 of the way through, which is that you're about to lose your job? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I love that you name names, because I think we're living in a world where exactly. And if you hadn't written about it, that other people were writing about it and posting it and saying, hey, this is unacceptable. And so there's a certain amount of accountability for your own bullshit. Yeah. And I think social media has created this environment where there is that accountability, because we now see what happens when somebody is treated badly by a company or a CEO, and we see these things go viral. We see them out there. So I kind of applauded you for doing that. A lot of people would not have done it, but I think it's important. I think it's important to do that.
Well, there are several reasons. One is I wanted it to be more realistic, and the other is that I'm just sort of a mean bastard. But I mean, I take apart I analyze this stuff every day. Yeah. My blog every weekday. So when Samsung phones start exploding, right, and then they talk about battery incidents in their statement, I'm like, battery incidents? That doesn't sound like what's really happening. What's really happening is your phone is catching on fire. Okay, can we use the word fire or explosion? No, we can't. But I think that's what they need to do.
Owning the bullshit. Yes. No, and for the record, I will say that Josh is the nicest, meanest bastard that I've ever met. I will say that. Well, I love that. I totally agree. And you and I both wage war on jargon and BS, because it's really the enemy. It's anathema to connecting with your audience. And if you really want to make a real connection, you have to get that stuff out of the way. But I think so many. Here's what's interesting. I'd love your take on this. Because as I'm reading the book, and I'm with you, I'm totally already in your corner. Everybody hates bullshit. We all agree. Like, there's nobody that, if you ask them, do you love reading jargon-laden stuff? No one's going to say yes. And yet, in that business mindset, people can't turn that filter off. In your research for this, did you talk to people about that? What did you discover about why that's so hard to turn off?
I spent a lot of effort on understanding what causes these things,
Yeah.
so that I can help people to understand what's really happening and to stop it.
Yeah.
Because it's really easy to say, "Oh, this is terrible." It's much harder to say, "Why did it happen and how can you fix it?"
Yeah.
So let's just take jargon as an example. When people work in a company and they are all talking to each other, they develop a shorthand. And they
Mhm.
may even develop this shorthand, the jargon that they use with other people in their field. But customers have no idea what you're talking about. And usually when someone's using jargon, they think, well, this is the right way to talk about this. This sounds sophisticated. But in fact, what you're doing is you're creating a little circle, and inside of the circle are the people who understand. That's a very small circle. And then there's this much larger circle that has most of your customers in it who are saying, what the hell are you talking about? I don't get it. The other thing, and this is really important to understand, is
Yeah.
that bad writing comes from fear.
Yeah.
People are afraid of saying what they actually mean. They are afraid that their boss will get upset with them. They are afraid that someone might actually believe they have a point of view. But the thing is, if you write muddy, difficult to understand stuff, the people who you're sending it to are going to get mad at you anyway. If you're going to say something negative, it's much better to say it clearly than to have someone eventually figure it out and get mad at you. And you actually can stand out for your candor. And that's really what I'm trying to get at, is that if you take the advice in the book, you will stand out from all of the bullshitters out there.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I'm with you. And even in words that I laugh because it's not bullshit, but it sort of is becoming bullshit because, and let's put it this way, it's empty calories. It's the empty calories in the writing world. And one of my favorites to laugh at lately is everything is hands-on workshop. And I laughed because I think, well, is there a hands-off workshop? And is that a big market? Is the hands-off training market, is that big? It just makes me laugh. I mean, because again, it's filler. It's not bullshit per se, but it kind of is rapidly becoming bullshit because it's really saying nothing at all.
One of the things people like most that I do on my blog is when I actually translate these things. And I've done this for statements from the North Korean government. I did it with the Samsung exploding phones. I just did it today with Comcast, which had to explain why they parked some trucks on the side of the road in Indianapolis and caused many, many car accidents as people came over the hill, tried to avoid the trucks, and slid off the road. And it's just you read this and you're like, whoa, that's what they were trying to say? And just imagine for a moment that you actually said what you're trying to say in a way that people could understand, how much time we'd all save, how much clarity we'd get, how much you wouldn't have to email people back saying, what the hell are you talking about? Or just sit there scratching your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think you nailed it. I think the big problem is people don't ask for clarity. They just don't respond. I think you lose people. And so sometimes you don't get that second choice or the second chance to get them back to actually clarify.
Yeah.
You said something really interesting. I'm reading from the book on page 20 here, which I thought was fascinating. And I thought about this.
Yeah.
You talked with Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, a big VC firm out here. And he said something that I've been thinking a lot about with respect to writing, which is in 2012, he said, babies born today will probably never read anything in print. So I start thinking to myself, will there be emoji bullshit? Will bullshit always be?
You can't, there will always be bullshit. My point in quoting Horowitz, and this was a public statement that he made, was that we used to read things on paper.
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of qualities that paper has that actually make it easier to understand. But you can look into the research on this. I quote a professor from American University, Naomi Barron, who looked into it, and you really have a much more difficult time concentrating on and understanding things that you read on a screen, but that's where we're reading everything. I have a kid, my youngest, who is now 17, in community college, does everything on the computer, and they just don't have any interest in physical objects or books or anything like that. Very difficult to buy Christmas presents for, but you just realize that this generation coming up doesn't care about it if it's not electronic. And that means we have we're writing using techniques that were designed for pieces of paper, and yet no one's reading that way.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because I think that regardless, my gut is probably regardless of the media and how we're delivering it, the human beings don't change. So the psychology of it will still be probably there. And I think, well, there's bullshit in social media. There will probably be bullshit in an all emoji, note. I think it's just the way human beings are wired.
Look, we have a president-elect coming in who, has a sort of tenuous relationship with the truth. And if you ask about whether bullshit succeeds in these new ways of communicating, I think the most recent election is a pretty good example of how, for both candidates, it became a sort of standard way of communicating.
Yeah. Sad and true. Speaking of which, one of the things I really appreciate about your book, and it's not the focus, but it's, I think, a legitimate issue. And I remember you putting a survey out when you were writing the book on Facebook, and you asked women. You asked about sort of the issue for women in communicating, because I love that you actually do address this as one of the chapters in your book, the gender layer, because I think it's a legit issue, and I've not seen anybody really openly address it in a book before. And I like that you kind of said, look, when women are clear, it can serve us, especially in writing, because, the nice thing about writing is that if you're clear and you're concise and you're smart in your writing, I think there's less of a gender bias, maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe tell us a little bit about that, because I thought that was a really important point. Women do try to make sure we smooth over everything, but that translates to the way that we speak and write sometimes.
So before I go into any detail on this, I just want to make sure everyone understands I do not hold myself up as an expert on gender and communication.
No.
Which my wife will tell you is certainly true. But so I wrote the book, and I send the first draft in to the editor at my publishing company, who's a woman, and she reads it and she says, "This is all terrific. You don't have to change anything, except I'd like you to put in a section about women and writing." And I said, "What do you mean? Writing is writing. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman who writes it." She's like, "Well, I think you need to check on that, because a lot of women will tell you it's different." So yes, at that point I said, all right, let me put this out on my blog and on Facebook and ask women if communication in writing is a challenge for them. Oh my God, you would not believe the dozens and dozens of people that I heard from, very, very intelligent women, saying, listen, this is what I have to deal with. Now in person, in meetings and things like that, it's very clear that women are not getting an even break. And there's a lot been written about that, and I think it's absolutely true, about men interrupting women and taking credit for their ideas and so on. But in writing, it is true that women often undermine their own way of doing things by apologizing for their opinions or trying to smooth things over. And the difference is that if you're doing it in writing, if you're writing an email or a report, you can notice that you're doing that, and you can actually edit it out and then get credit for your ideas. And I do believe that people are much more willing to accept a direct, bold truth and give credit to a woman if it's done in writing. And it ought to be the same when you're doing it in person. I can't fix that, but I can help people, women who want to get ahead by communicating clearly and boldly in writing.
Yeah, and I appreciated that you did qualify that, and it wasn't a big section of the book, but I liked that you actually did. So I think your editor was right, because I think it is a little different, and I appreciated that you did put that in the book,
Mhm.
because it is something that people shy away from. But I like that you addressed it head on and without bullshit. So I like
Mhm.
that. Um, Josh, in doing this book, what do people tell you they struggle with the most when it comes to um, why there's bullshit in their writing, and they know it's bullshit in their writing? Forget about the fear and the psychology of it. Like, where do they struggle the most in getting that bullshit out?
Well, I'll tell you, if people are doing real writing, if they're doing professional writing,
Yeah.
um, uh, this is something I absolutely suspected, and I was actually able to prove it with a survey I did of over 500 business writers. So I talked to people who did all sorts of writing, and one of the questions I said is, would you agree with the statement, our process for collecting and combining feedback works well? And 32% of the writers agreed with that statement.
Hmm.
And that confirmed for me that a lot of the problem happens down the line after somebody writes something. So you write something, you send it out for review, the legal people say do X, the technical experts say to do Y, somebody in PR says, oh no, we have to add this other stuff.
Mm.
The reviews come back too late, you stuff it all in, and then even if the original version was good, what comes out is a total confused mishmash.
Yeah.
And there is a way to solve that problem. It has to do with having a very disciplined process for writing and a disciplined process for reviews, and a complete change in attitude. The attitude change is that it is the purpose of a reviewer to tell you what needs fixing, not to tell you how to fix it. You, as the writer, then go in and use your own perspective to determine how to combine all of that stuff. So a lot of what you read is terrible, not because the person who wrote it is a terrible writer, but because the person who wrote it put in a whole bunch of comments that made it much worse than it had originally been.
Yeah, no doubt about it. What's your? You have a whole chapter on weasel words, which makes me laugh.
Yes.
And Josh knows this, and people who watch me know that I'm a comedian, and I have a background in improv and stand up. And weaselly words are really awful for business, but they're great for comedy because they are. I laugh at some of the craziest jargon out there, and I have my own one to hate these days. What weasel word is your favorite to hate?
Well, let me define what weasel words mean.
Yes.
Okay, so a weasel word is an intensifier or a qualifier that is not precise. So to explain what that means, it's a word like huge or very or incredible or most. These are words that don't actually mean anything, but you layer them on, and you get enough of them, and you just read a press release full of it, and you're like, who are these people trying to fool? Now, if you actually want to know, I will tell you the weasel word I hate most is the word deeply.
Oh, yeah.
So let me explain the difference. So I'm sitting here looking at you. Suppose I say, Kathy is a smart person and an excellent performer. Okay, that's great. You know how I feel about the work you do. Now, suppose I say, I'm deeply impressed with Kathy's deep knowledge of her subject area. It's like, okay, the minute you hear that, it's like, you're just making stuff up, aren't you? So, especially in apologies, we are deeply sorry about the fact that our phones actually exploded on an airplane. Yes, that's so much better than just being sorry. You're deeply sorry. Thanks, we feel much better.
Right. As if the more adjectives we throw in there, the more people are like, well, that's meaningful. Because when you just said sorry, that just wasn't enough. But now that you're deeply sorry, yeah. I never looked at very the same way after reading your book. So Josh, you described this, and I think you're spot on. Very, and I think very is one of those weasel words that it adds no value. It actually just detracts. I think it's a destroyer of value because I never thought about it that way. I couldn't put my arms around it, but when reading your book, you talk about we're throat clearing, but more than that, what's the difference? If you just say, look, that's a great book, but if that's a very wonderful book. Well, what's the difference between very wonderful and wonderful? Are there other levels of wonderfulness? I don't know.
It's just random enthusiasm. It doesn't really mean anything. Steven Pinker, the famous psychologist and expert on writing, talks about, suppose I make the statement, okay, so Kathy is an honest person. Well, that's sort of binary. You either are or you aren't. And I said, you are. Now, if I say Kathy is a very honest person, that says, all right, there's a scale, there's a continuum, right? And Kathy is a little closer to the honest end than the dishonest end. So I'm actually saying something worse by qualifying it. I'm saying, well, she's very honest. There's situations where she'd rip you off, but she's very honest. So, and there's a famous quote. There is a famous quote that's attributed to Mark Twain, probably erroneously, where he says, you should just go into your manuscript and replace the word very with damn in every situation. And then your copy editor will remove the word damn, and then you'll be fine.
I love that, though, because it's true, because it really doesn't add value to what you're saying. And quite the opposite, actually, to your point. It's like, if you have to qualify it, then is the person honest? Like, your example is a good one, because you're actually maybe causing the person to doubt. Like, why did they have to say very, very honest?
Yes. Yeah. It sets off alarm bells. I tell people, if you're going to use a weasel word, if everyone uses them. First of all, like what I say about passive voice and jargon and weasel words, the objective is not to eliminate all of them. It's just to eliminate the huge amount that we use. There's a weasel word, huge, and reduce it to a manageable level. But in the case of weasel words, you can remove them altogether and see if that's true, or you can replace it with something precise. So instead of saying, we have incredible software, you can say, our software was rated tops in the PC Magazine survey, or you can say, we are the best-selling software of this kind. And then you're actually making a statement that means something as opposed to just random adjectives.
Right. Makes total sense. And it makes so much sense. And as writers, sometimes we forget that words matter. And it is hard to choose an economy of words and make sure that every word counts. Because there is that throat clearing that we do in writing. But there's writing and there's editing. And I think that's the beauty of the magic of editing.
One of my principles is to try and write short, to do things as briefly as possible. Yeah. And to help with that, one of the things I recommend you do is, to help with the throat clearing, is people do that. That's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. It may be part of your process. Now go in and delete the first paragraph of what you wrote. Yeah. Does it still make sense? Great. You didn't need it. Now you have a new first paragraph. Delete the new first paragraph. Does it still make sense? Oh, now you've made it even shorter. At some point, you will delete something and say, oh, no, I needed that. Yeah. And that's where your manuscript should start, where your writing should start, is at that first actual paragraph that says something.
Yeah. No, and that's a great segue, because I think you talk about in the book where to start. And I want to just talk about that for a second, because I love that you have a whole chapter that's kind of dedicated towards, all right, let's get clear on what you want to accomplish here. And and I think sometimes we don't take enough time as writers to really get in the mindset of, all right, what's my end goal here? What do I want somebody to think and feel and walk away with? And so when we talk about where to start clearing the bullshit, where to start the deforestation of bullshit, how can we help that process, Josh? At the very outset, before we sit down and write, what intentional things can we do?
So what I'm about to describe, I'd recommend for writing that matters. So if you're just responding to an email, you don't need to do this. Even if you're sending an email to a few people, you don't need to do this. But if you're creating anything that many people will read, a report, an email to your whole department, an email to your boss, that really matters. Yeah. These are the steps to take. It's an acronym. ROAM, or Rome. The first step is readers. understand who your audience is. Everyone knows that's important. O is objective. What are you actually trying to create as a change in the mind of the person reading it? The only purpose of business writing is to create a change in the mind of the reader. So what change do you want to create? The A is action, and that's different. That's what do you want them to do? So if you're explaining that they should upgrade the software, the objective is to help them to understand that there's an upgrade, and then the action you want them to take is to actually click on the button and upgrade the software. Now, the last thing is the thing people don't usually think about. The M is for impression. And yes, I do know how to spell. I know that impression starts with an I, but Roy is hard to remember and Rome is easy to remember. So M is for impression. And the impression is, what will people think of you? And this is the thing that people don't realize, is that every communication you send out is saying, hey, I'm Josh, I'm here, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to communicate, I'm smart, I'm well organized, I'm going to save you time, I'm part of a good organization, you don't want to inadvertently communicate, I'm a bullshitter that's full of jargon and doesn't give a damn about your time. I wonder, that I just have so much sympathy for the people who work in public relations, many of whom I've worked with and who are terrific. But it's like, after the 69th useless press release that you sent out, what will we think of you? We'll think, oh, you're a time-wasting loser. And you don't really want people to think about you that way.
Yeah. No, and it's hard, too, because we're fighting a battle. We're all fighting a battle of so much noise out there. And our focus, it's harder and harder. And that kind of stuff just, I think, rubs your audience more and more the wrong way. I mean, that's really what it is. And I think you're spot on. What surprised you the most? Because you wrote this book at a really interesting time, a presidential election cycle. And there's nothing. It was
part of my marketing plan. It was right there in the book proposal.
And I love that you did that, because you often would post on Facebook. You would post stuff about announcements from both camps. And I love that you did that. And I appreciated that. Anything kind of surprised you as you were writing this book that was really kind of informed by the bullshit of politics that made it into this book?
Well, most of politics is about what people say, not what they write. But Trump actually changed that by being so adept at using Twitter. Well, okay, he was effective. You may not agree with it, but you have to say that was a tactic that was very effective. I was surprised that truth had so little value. I was surprised that people got away with saying stuff that was not true and could easily be checked, and that it didn't seem to make that much difference to them. And that's a very sad statement about our environment. I also think, though, that it's going to have a backlash, and that the candidate who wins the next election will be one who can be completely truthful, because the bullshit just got to the point where you couldn't trust people. What else surprised me? I've written about fake news, and in fact, I have a pretty long think piece on fake news that's probably going to be appearing soon. And I think our environment, the social media environment we're in, actually rewards extreme points of view that don't have anything to do with the truth. And that did that change the election? Well, I think if you look at the narrowness of the margin in some of these states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Florida, you can actually say that it could have made a difference. And that's I am a big believer in truth. People have called me all sorts of things, but the only thing you can't call me is dishonest. I am honest, not very honest, as you would say. I am actually honest. And I believe there's a value in that. And I would like to believe that the electorate understands that. And we need to come to a point where they do understand the difference between truth and just made up crap that we're reading online.
Yeah. And that's a really big point. Maybe, I don't know, I can't wait to read your article, and I don't know if this is going to inform another book for you. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think one of the things that I appreciated about your book, and which was in such stark contrast to the political election, and both camps, I hope people still value the truth, because the essence of what you're talking about is, do people still value the truth? And in a cycle of extreme viewpoints that rewards with ratings and viewers and everybody fighting for mind share, I wonder if as a society we have lost our emphasis and value of the truth. And I don't know the answer to that. I hope the answer is no, but I kind of wonder about whether or not we actually put a premium more on entertainment and shock than we do on the actual substance being truthful.
Well, the news media are in a terrible financial situation. There's the difference between opinion and fact. It gets blurred all the time. If you look even at a print site, if you look at a site like the New York Times, okay, they have contributed articles on there that are advertising. They're what's it called? Contributed content, and it's clearly marked off as advertising, but it sits there next to the news, and the more you get confused, the more money they make from people who want you to click on it. So we are, plus on Facebook, every article looks the same as every other article, whether it's from the New York Times or Breitbart. I think we need to change. And in fact, what I'm recommending is a system enabled by all of these technology companies that rates things not just true or false, but this is satire, this is slanted, this is old information, and that when you're looking at any piece of supposed media, that you can see what its provenance is. You can get an idea of whether it's worth believing or not.
That's a great idea. I really love it. What's your favorite, I'd say, least bullshit-oriented thing that you like to read?
Well, I love 538, actually, the site that Nate Silver runs.
Yes.
And everyone's like, oh, he got the election wrong. No, they're actually wrong. He said there was a 30% chance that Trump would win. And, things that 30% of the time happen, they do happen 30% of the time. So, his analysis is very sharp. Jay Rosen from NYU is sort of a critic of the news media. He's very, very much on target. And I'm a fan of the Washington Post. There's so much great stuff out there, and it's just that you need to ask, what is the person trying to accomplish who wrote this, and be skeptical of it, regardless of where you're reading it. You want to understand what everybody's bias is.
Yeah. No, and I think well said. I think today we've lost the art of critical analysis. Yeah. And to me, in college, my professors always said, follow the money, and then you'll know where the bias is. And I think we need to be critical thinkers. Critical, when we ingest news, we need to be critical of what it is and what the biases are. What's next for you, Josh? I mean, you talked a little bit about writing another book about Without Bullshit, and I'm curious. Any updates for us?
I cannot make an announcement here. I sound like a politician. I had proposed a number of books to people and polled them, and the one that they liked is also the one I like best, which is to do a book about thinking like an analyst. As an analyst, I learned, and this is over 20 years, I learned to do primary research, to get opposing viewpoints, to check what people were saying by talking to their suppliers and to their customers, to look at how big changes are happening, like social media was a good example of that. Maybe augmented reality is the next next one, and then say, oh, what difference would this make? Autonomous cars, whatever it happens to be, and to value quantitative analysis, to actually understand what data is and how you can use it. I actually use this technique to prove that we're wasting $396 billion in wages every year on people who are reading and not understanding poorly written stuff in the workplace. So it's the same technique. So there may be a book for me called Thinking Without Bullshit in the future. The thing that I've found, though, is that my advice on writing is popular.
Yeah.
I'm doing workshops for people. I just edited Shel Israel and Robert Scoble's book on augmented reality. That was fun.
Yes.
I really think I made a difference there. And I am right now considering a collaboration with a senior executive in business on a book on innovation. So I can't tell you any more about that, but there's a lot of people who are interested if you're able to express yourself powerfully and clearly, and I'm really glad that I'm in a position to be able to help people with that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I have to say, I did enjoy the book, Robert and Shel's book. And I knew you were kind of the man behind the editing. Editing is the secret sauce. So I love it. Josh, where can people get a hold of you? What's the best way to contact you?
Well, if you want to follow what I'm doing, just go to withoutbullshit.com. And if you don't really want to type those words on your keyboard, you can type Bernoff.com, Bernoff.com, and it goes the same place. I blog every morning about writing, about politics, about bullshit, and about people expressing themselves clearly, and a little bit about the future of technology. You can also get a hold of me at josh@bernoff.com. Can't possibly be any simpler than that. I'm at jbernoff on Twitter. And I have a list of places that I'm going to be appearing and giving speeches on my site at withoutbullshit.com if people want to see where they can get a hold of me. There's the sequel to the content management conference that you and I both spoke at last year will be taking place in Boston coming up this spring, and I'll be participating in that as well. Fantastic.
Well, thank you for this book, Writing Without Bullshit, Josh Bernoff. We're going to burn off those empty, jargon-laden word calories. That's what we're going to do. That's my play on words for the day. Everybody, I'm Kathy Klotz-Guest. I'm the author of Stop Boring Me, How to Create Kick-Ass Marketing Content, Products, and Ideas Through the Power of Improv. And that is no bullshit. And should I say, I have to say this, who wrote the back verbiage?
Oh, cool.
But our very own Josh Bernoff. So thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.